So are you looking to practice your SQL skills for an upcoming data science interview? If so, you've come to the right place. Today, we'll be using the amazing interview query platform to practice some SQL. I'm Samanvay, a data scientist living in Sydney, Australia. SQL is a foundational language that is very popular in the data science industry. Every data science practitioner is expected to know SQL, which makes it very popular for the technical rounds of data science interviews. I used it quite frequently early on in my career, but ever since getting into a managerial role, I've been out of practice. So this was my chance to use the interview query platform to brush up on my SQL and give you some helpful tips to prepare for these interviews. Welcome to Interview Query. So this is the platform we're going to use today to practice SQL interview questions. The cool thing about this platform is it's got a huge bank of SQL questions to work through. Today we're going to go through 3 different questions, and along the way I'll give you some tips and tricks to make it a bit easier to solve. And we'll pick 3 questions, an easy, medium and a hard one to solve. So let's get started. So in this case, what I've done is I've filtered the questions to go from easy to medium. We can also filter them right here, but I'll just pick one here. Cool. On the left hand side we've got a description of the question, and on the right hand side we've got a bit of an editor. So we've got what it looks like an events table that keeps track of every user's actions. A small example of events table would look like this. Great. So we've got some user ID, we've got created at date, actions and platform they're using. So using this information, we wish to find out how many users have opened an email. Which query would you use for that? Great. So the input will be this events table, and the output will just be a single column. That's number of users open email. Great. So what I'll do is I'll switch to Postgres, and let's take a look at this table in a bit more detail. I'm expecting to see something like this. Awesome. There's also an ID column here, I suppose, which you can't see on the left hand side. Great. So it seems like the only thing we're interested in is the email opened action, which is going to help us find out how many users have actually opened an email. So in this case, my approach would be to filter this entire table to just give me all the events where it's email open. Then we can do a count of distinct user IDs. So let's try doing that. And what I'll do is I'll just stick to lowercase SQL, given that's the default. Usually I like to do uppercase, but I guess it doesn't really matter. Great. So let's start off with a pretty basic filter, which is going to be on the action. And we're going to filter it to email open. Great. So what I'm going to do is I always like to run each step to actually visualize what's going on. And let's run that to make sure that we're getting the right table. Great. So we're getting all the events for emailed open, and now we've got user ID. Let's do a count of user ID, and we'll name this exactly what we had here: num users open email. And let's run that one. Ooh, that's interesting. Expected output is number of users. Cool. So in this case, we have missed a very important statement, which is our distinct statement. So we must have a number of events per user ID. So we'll chuck in a distinct user ID count, and there. So we've got 5 users that have opened an email with the email opened action. Awesome. So I mean, that was pretty straightforward, and this is a question that has been asked at Meta Wayfair. Great. So we can go back to our questions and let's try to find medium hard question. So this time we'll filter our difficulty to be medium, and then let's pick one. Let's pick this monthly customer report one. That looks a bit interesting. All right, so let's get on to the second question. So this question is called the monthly customer report. This is of a medium difficulty with a 50% success rate, and looks like it's been asked at quite a few companies, including Amazon, Databricks, JP Morgan Chase, Target, TikTok. Cool. So I'm excited for this one. So let's see what this one's got in store for us. I'll just switch to the Postgres. Cool. So our task is to write a query that shows the number of users, number of transactions placed, and total order amount per month in the year 2020, assuming we are only interested in monthly reports for a single year. Cool. So I've got access to about 3 tables. So I've got a transactions table, products, and users. So let's take a look at this. And this is always a helpful thing to do before you start, I guess, cracking on with the question. It's to visualize the layout and look at the actual data and not just the schema. Always helps me to see the shape and form of the data. Cool. So we've got our user ID, created at date, product ID, and quantity. Then for the products table, let's take a look. So for the products table, I've got an ID, name of the item, and the price. Then the users table, we've got name and gender of the person. Cool. So guess what is the output we want to produce? So we want to produce a month row, and for every single month row, we're going to have the total number of customers, the total number of orders, and the total order amount. So it seems like we should be able to do all of this with like a group by statement. Once we've created the table that we need, it seems like the information that we're going to need is actually just in the first 2 tables. So this is going to give us a transactions info. The ID is the transaction ID. It's going to tell us exactly which user has ordered, and we also know the product that they've ordered. The other manipulation we'll probably have to do is do something with this quantity and the price to actually get some sort of a total transaction amount. So let's take a look at the transactions table first. What I'll do is I'll filter this to just give me transactions from the year 2020. And for this, I'll use my extract function. This allows me to extract the year, month, day, even hour, minute, etc. From any date or timestamp column. So I'm going to extract the year first from the created at column, which is date time, and I'm going to filter it so that it is filtered to 2020. Let's run that. Whenever I've made a change, I always like to run the query again to make sure that it's returning me a table with the data I need. So it looks like it's filtered down to 2020, and it's possible that this table only contains data from 2020, but you can never be too sure here. Maybe it's only giving us a preview here. So you need to be deterministic in the way you do this filtering. So now that I've filtered it down to 2020, I'm gonna add in a month column, which is gonna give me the month integer. And this is gonna be our filter. Well, that's gonna serve as our group by column. So let me just run that again, make sure that month is there as an additional column, which it is, and I'm just going to eyeball it with the created at. So this is the 31st, January 1, okay, cool, 29th, February 2, okay. That seems to be working fine. Cool. Now what I need is I need to bring in the price information from the products table, and this is going to allow me to then calculate the total transaction value for that particular row. So we'll do a left join. So I want to do a left join to the products table. And I'll just alias as well. And this is something that just makes some of these queries a little bit easier to write. So here in the transactions, I'm going to be joining onto the product ID column, and then from the product table, I'll join it onto the ID. So let's see if that's worked. Cool, that seems to have done the job. And then before I move on to the final group by, which is gonna let us bring this output, let us actually create this table, we need to also calculate the actual transaction line total. So let's do that. We'll add in another column here, which is gonna multiply my quantity with my price, and I'm just gonna call it transaction line total. Let's run that. Okay, so I've got my transaction line total. So now the only thing remaining is our final group by to give us the information we need. And what I'll do is, before I do that final group by, we'll convert this into a CTE, which will enable us to do this a little bit more easily. We could also do a nested SQL statement, but I guess a CTE is a little bit cleaner. So the way CTEs work is it basically sets up a temporary table for us to query. So let's do that. Actually, before the CTE, I will select only the columns I need. So I'll select ID. I'll be a bit explicit and rename this to be transaction ID. I'll select user ID. I've got my month, transaction total. Do I need total number of orders? No, I don't. I just need transaction line total. Actually, that's it. I should only need these 4 columns. So let's just run that. ID, of course, I need to be specific with the ID I'm pulling out, because the product table also has an ID. So I'm going to pull out the ID from the transactions table. Let's do that. Cool, we've got a transaction ID, user ID, month, transaction line total. Now all that's remaining is to group this. Let's convert this to a CTE, and we'll call this modified transactions by month as, and we'll go month. Actually, what I'll do is I'll just write my from statement first. And we're probably going to be doing a group by, and we'll be doing a group by month. Now let's define our columns. So month first, then we need to calculate our num customers. So this one is just going to be a count distinct of user ID as num customers. Then we're going to do total number of orders. We'll do distinct transaction ID as num orders. And now finally we have our order total. So the order total is just going to be the sum of our transaction line total, and we'll alias this to be order amount. Okay, let's see how that works. Cool, that seemed to have done the job. We've got month, total number of customers, number of orders, and order amount. Awesome. Let's now move on to our final question. This one is called the best performing advertisers. This is of a difficulty hard, success rate 30%, and it seems like only 22 companies have actually asked this one. Cool, let's get cracking. So our task is to find the 3 best performing days ever recorded for each advertiser who achieved the highest weekly revenue in 2021. You may assume all transactions happened in 2021. You may assume that every record within the amount column is different. Okay, so let's take a look at our tables one at a time. We'll take a look at advertiser table. So we've got advertiser ID and we've got advertiser name. Then let's take a look at our revenue table. We've got our payment ID, advertiser ID, transaction date, amount. Cool. So our first task is to actually find the advertiser who achieved the highest weekly revenue. So we've got a number of advertisers here, and we've got quite a few transaction dates. So I think what we can do first is we can add a week column to this, and then we can find the total weekly amount by advertiser ID and month. Then we can sort that table by the total amount to give us, well, actually no. What we'll need to do is we'll need to find the highest week. Yeah, actually we can just sort it by the highest amount and pick the advertiser that has them. Okay, so let's add in a month column. We'll extract month from transaction date to be month. We'll get advertiser ID here. We don't need all the columns. We'll get amount. Okay, we'll put the amount here. Actually, we are getting week, not month. My bad. Week. Actually, we can just do a group by in here. So if we do a group by advertiser ID and week, we can sum the amount to be our total weekly, weekly total. Advertiser ID week doesn't exist yet, so we'll just have to use this week. Okay, let's try that. Cool. So advertiser, we've got an advertiser ID weekly total. Now now let's make this into a CT. We can just go with weekly revenue as, and let's find the advertiser ID with the highest weekly total. And I'll also take this from, oh, we're using alternate. Let's just normalize this. Weekly total from weekly revenue. We'll order by weekly total descending, weekly total descending, and let's pick the first one. Okay, so we've got advertiser with the advertiser ID 3 with a total weekly amount of 2465. Okay, so then what we need to do is get the 3 best performing days for this advertiser. I'll convert this one to a CT as well, and we can use this as a way to filter our revenue table and then find our top performing days. So we'll make this highest revenue advertiser as cool, and I probably don't need weekly total because I was just using it to verify our approach. Cool. So we've got a highest revenue advertiser. Then we can select star from revenue where our advertiser ID is, select star from highest revenue advertiser. Okay, let's advertiser ID. Let's try that. Okay, so we should see only transactions for advertiser 3. Okay. Then what we want to do is we want to go order by amount, and we'll limit it to 3. And we'll make this, actually, we need to make this, okay, so this is actually done the reverse. So we need to do descending so that we go from highest amount to the lowest. Let's try that. Okay. All right, cool. So what do we want? We want advertiser name, transaction, and amount. Okay, so we need to get the name of the advertiser. So we'll join this, left join advertisers. And we can left join it on advertiser ID in both columns. Yeah, both advertiser ID columns exist in advertisers and revenue. We also need to add in, we need to qualify this advertiser ID, given now we'll have 2 of them. So we'll just pick cool. This should give us everything we need. Advertiser name, transaction date, and finally amount. Okay, let's try that. And limit 3, most best performing. Okay, let's try that. Cool. That seemed to have done the job. Awesome. So that seems to have done it. Cool. So that's the end of our SQL interview questions demo. So that's it for our live SQL interview practice. Hopefully you learned some tips and tricks as to how to approach these problems. Some of them are definitely not the easiest to solve, but practice makes perfect. And I'll leave a link to interview query in the description below, as well as the comment section. So feel free to tackle the rest of the SQL questions in the question bank. If you enjoyed the video, then smash the like button and I'll see you next time.